Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to our virtual research update. In this presentation, I'm going to describe a project that we started more than 10 years ago and involves the turfgrass breeding programs at 5 different institutions in the southeastern U.S. The University of Florida, Oklahoma State University, North Carolina State University, the University of Georgia, and Texas A&M University. This is the Warm Season Turfgrass Specialty Crops Research Initiative and is funded by the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. So back in 2009, the turfgrass breeders at these institutions started talking about the possibility of exchanging germplasm so that our breeding populations could be tested in a wider set of environments. So we submitted an application and were funded for $3.8 million for improvement and commercialization of drought and salinity tolerant turf grasses. The idea was to bring different expertise together to have not only the breeders involved, but also physiologists that could help with drought and salinity evaluations, extension specialists that could help with promoting the best management practices for these cultivars, and also socioeconomists that could understand better consumer preference and help us breeders go after the right traits in developing these cultivars. So it was a multi-institutional approach, but also a multidisciplinary approach to the development of more drought and salinity tolerant turf grasses. So we created this team that has been working together since 2010. And the idea was to not only foster the exchange of germplasm, but also foster sharing of expertise, facilities, and resources across programs to facilitate cross-evaluation of breeding materials. Different universities entered breeding lines of different species, as you can see in this table below. The 4 species that we work with were soja grass, Bermuda grass, and Augustine grass, and seashore paspalum. And there were different universities that entered different species. The initial evaluations involved nurseries that were planted each of 4 years at 7 locations across the US. 2 locations in Florida, 1 in North Carolina, 2 in Georgia, 1 in Oklahoma, and 2 in Dallas. And as you can see in some of these pictures, these were very different testing environments, not just in terms of the soils, as you can see in these pictures, but also different temperatures, different cycles of rain and drought, different pest pressure, both in insects and fungal diseases. So the idea was to expose each breeder's materials to as many different stresses as possible, to really choose lines that have very stable performance across the southeastern US. So in each of these nurseries, we tested 160 lines of Bermuda, St. Augustine grass, soja grass, and 80 lines of seashore paspalum. The group continued working together. In 2015, we submitted a new grant for $4.8 million that kind of expanded on that original project. We had developed advanced materials, and we needed to continue evaluation of those grasses, address the drought tolerance, and address how much water these grasses actually needed. The proposal also included continuing the breeding of new materials and evaluating them, also development of genetic tools to facilitate breeding or to make breeding more efficient, continue the socioeconomic piece, understanding consumer preferences, and also developing extension programs to promote the adoption of these new cultivars that we were developing. The accomplishments of this second phase of the grant were several. In terms of breeding, 6 cultivars total were released from these efforts. Tiftaf and Tahoma 31 are 2 that can be mentioned in Bermuda grass. And there are several lines that are in the final stages of evaluation before getting released. In terms of management, we have developed a lot of information on what are the water savings and overall performance of these lines. And we also started developing protocols on the use of drones to evaluate turf grasses for drought response. In terms of genomics, we have identified genomic regions that control drought tolerance in St. Augustine grass, soja grass, and seashore paspalum. And in the area of socioeconomics, we developed consumer preference service, and we have learned a lot about what are traits that consumers are more willing to pay for. Last year, 2019, we submitted a 3rd phase of this project. This grant was for $7.9 million, and it expands on some of the areas that we have already working on. The idea, the core idea behind this new project is that development of these new drought-tolerant grasses is extremely important, but adoption is also a critical component, because you can have a cultivar that is very drought tolerant, but if it's not being used, or if it's not being managed properly in terms of how much water it's been applied to that grass, then the real benefits of the grass are not being exploited fully. So we have a physiology component trying to understand what makes a grass more drought tolerant. We're continuing on the use of drones and evaluation of turf grasses. The breeding component continues in development of new lines and evaluation of advanced lines that were developed in the previous grant. We're also expanding on the genomics component of the project, adding bioinformatics to and trying to identify candidate genes that are controlling both drought tolerance in some of the species and salinity in paspalum. And the extension piece has also been increased. We have now a large outreach component that is trying to promote adoption of these new cultivars. One thing to mention is that we have added a team member. We're proud to include UC-Riverside as part of our team, and we're very excited that now we're including evaluation of our grasses all the way out west, where conditions are drier than the southeast, so it's very interesting to see how the lines perform in this new environment. For NC State's piece, we are participating. We have a team of experts here in NC State that are participating in several components of this project. We have a physiology component, the breeding component, genomics, and the extension piece. So for the physiology component, Grady Miller is the person leading this piece of the project. And the idea is to improve our understanding of what are the mechanisms associated with drought tolerance in these cultivars that we have developed during the first two phases of the project. Rob Austin is leading the US component of the project here at NC State. And the idea is to develop high throughput evaluation tools for turf grasses. Being able to accumulate more data and maybe understand at an earlier stage when a grass is stressed and how you need to manage it. For the breeding component, we are continuing to develop new breeding lines with improved drought tolerance. We're establishing evaluations of these lines, and we're also continuing to evaluate the lines that were developed in the two phases of the grant. I'm leading the breeding piece here at NC State, and on the analytics, as you can imagine, there's a lot of data being generated on these breeding materials across the 7 institutions. So we have Dr. Jeff Dunn, who's an assistant professor in the Crop and Soil Science Department at NC State, and Dr. Beatriz Gouveia, who's a postdoctoral researcher. They're leading the analytics piece. For the genomics piece, Dr. Xinguang Yu, who's a member of the breeding program here at NC State, is leading continuing developing of marker tools so that we can use DNA markers for improving the selection efficiency during the breeding process. And then Dr. Amanda Holzekemp, who is physically based at NC State, but she's actually a computational biologist for the USDA. She's the one leading the bioinformatics piece. On the extension piece here in NC State, again, Dr. Grady Miller is leading these, and the idea is to develop extension programs that can promote what are the best management practices for these new cultivars. Again, we develop drought-tolerant cultivars, but if we're not applying the right amount of water to these grasses, then the true benefits are not being fully exploited. So the idea, again, is to incorporate all these different pieces to apply this multidisciplinary approach to developing new grasses, but also to promote the adoption of these new cultivars so that we can fully exploit the benefits for the full turfgrass industry. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you're interested in how some of the analysis of these large evaluations are being conducted, the next presentation summarizes that work. Thank you very much.